a teddy bear, a silent cry, and a dog who wouldn't move. The town of Brookridge was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. On a Tuesday afternoon, parents filled their carts, children begged for candy, and the cashier barely noticed the man with tattoos leading a little girl by the hand. She was small, her pink dress wrinkled, her teddy bear clutched so tightly the ear was flattened. No one looked twice, except for Coda, the police K9, who froze in the middle of aisle 15. Her handler, Officer Daniel Ruiz, felt the leash stiffen. He followed her gaze and saw the girl, too still, too quiet, too controlled for a child her age. Then came the gesture, so quick it could have been missed. A tiny hand folding in on itself. A message Daniel had only seen in training slides. Most officers would have ignored it, but Coda wouldn't move, wouldn't blink, and sometimes that's enough to change everything. Under the humming fluorescence of Brookridge Market, the world moved on its ordinary rails. Barcode beeps, a squeaky cartwheel, the distant crackle of the store radio arguing softly with old pop music. It was the hour of coupons and small talk. Parents compared prices, someone coughed near the pharmacy, a teenager restocked apples and tried not to bruise them. Nothing here asked to be remembered. Coda noticed first. She halted so suddenly that Daniel Ruiz, hand light on her harness, felt the check through his palm. A stillness rippled through the shepherd's body, ears lifted, head angled, a breath held at the edge of a scent. She wasn't staring at the stacked cereal boxes or the pyramid of paper towels. She was looking past them, through the gloss and color, toward a small figure midway down aisle 15. The child couldn't have filled the space inside a winter coat. 5 years old, maybe. Hair the color of corn silk, messy as if sleep still clung to it. In her arms, a teddy bear pressed tight, threadbare at the seams, one ear pulled flatter than the other. A fabric face smudged from too much comfort. The bear had a name, Daniel thought. They always did. Coda's tail went still, neither wag nor tuck. The line of her back read like the first measure of a hymn. Attentive, reverent, quiet. Daniel's pulse rose without permission. "What do you see, girl?" he whispered, though he had learned over time that the dog already had the language she needed. He followed the line of her gaze and found the moment waiting for him, small as a coin and twice as valuable. The girl's hand moved, not a wave, not a grab for a box on the shelf. Her palm turned out, thumb tucked in. 4 fingers curled down, slow, like a closing curtain. If you didn't know, you wouldn't know. Most people didn't. The gesture was almost swallowed by the store's moth-colored light, by the ordinary rustle of cardboard and plastic. It looked like nothing, and it meant everything. Daniel felt the cold slide across his chest, the way it did when ice cracks under your weight. He had sat through those trainings, the laminated slides, the videos short enough to keep attention, but long enough to haunt. He had promised himself, quietly, the way some men promise to stop drinking coffee after midnight, that if he ever saw it outside a classroom, he would not walk past. The child's other hand clung to the bear. She stood too still for her age, like a photo that hadn't learned how to move yet. Beside her, a man considered serial in a way that felt performed. Tattoos spilled down his forearms. Ink vanished under a sleeve near the wrist. He was calm in the way of men who rehearsed calm in mirrors. He did not touch the girl. He did not need to. Presence can be a hand on the back, even when it's not. Coda's breath shivered at the edge of a whine. She didn't give it voice. She didn't need to. Daniel eased her a half step forward, putting himself between the dog and the end of the aisle, where the man might glance and see them. He kept his posture loose, the way you do when you're only shopping, when you're wearing a badge but trying to make it small. Fragments assembled, smudges on the pink dress, a pair of scuffed shoes that looked like they'd been chosen for their cost, not their color, a face that brightened for an instant when the cashier down the way laughed, then dimmed as if someone had turned a hand against a switch. The bear's ear. His own daughter had a bear once whose ear went like that from being carried everywhere, even to the bath, wrapped in a plastic bag, because she insisted friends don't wait outside doors. Easy, he breathed. Not to Coda, to himself. He let his eyes unfocus just enough to catch movements without staring. The man lifted a box of cereal, read the back as though there were an exam, put it into the basket. He said something the child didn't answer. She looked at the bear, then at nothing. The world around them continued to exist. A jar rattled onto tile somewhere. Someone laughed too loudly near the freezer section. The door to the stockroom flapped and closed, flapped and closed. Coda's nose lifted as air shifted down the aisle. Daniel felt the vibration of her attention through their shared line, the way a fisherman feels river current through a rod. He had seen her signal explosives more than once, had watched her thread a search grid, like she was reading invisible text. But this stillness was a different language. He had learned to trust it. The girl's hand made the gesture again, palm out, thumb tucked, fingers folding. Smaller this time, quicker. It would have been easy to call it fidgeting. Children fidget. Bears are heavy when you've been carrying them too long. She didn't look around to see who had seen. She didn't see Coda because Coda was not asking to be seen. Good dogs, Daniel had learned, don't need credit. They need doing. He thought of the lecture hall where he sometimes guest taught, rows of young faces, stiff uniforms, the sound of pens scratching as he said the words he wished he'd been told sooner. When a child asks for help without a voice, you must lend them yours. He thought of the older cases that had lived under his ribs longer than he wanted, the ones that did not end with the right door opening. He felt for a beat the ache of both the past and the promise he had made to it. At the end of the aisle, near the open space, where end caps piled seasonal items, discounted candles that smelled like cinnamon, someone turned a cart sharply and bumped into the metal rack. The sound was enough to turn the girl's head. The bear's flattened ear brushed her cheek. The man looked down at her then, a glance clipped at the edges. His calm reassembled. He placed a hand near her shoulder, without landing it. Proximity can be a kind of pressure. Coda shifted one paw forward. The metal tag on her collar clicked once against her vest. The man's eyes flicked up past the child and skimmed the aisle like a flat stone across a pond. Daniel angled his body toward the shelves and pretended to read the nutrition label on a family-sized box. Whole grain, added vitamins. His heart thudded too hard for the information to mean anything. The girl's hand fell to her side. The gesture was gone as quickly as it had come, the water smoothed over. That was the thing about signals. They weren't built to be repeated. They were built to be caught. Daniel swallowed. The air tasted a little like sugar dust and cleaner, the way stores do when mornings are new. He adjusted the slack in Coda's lead and felt the dog's steadiness answer his own shaking focus. He watched the man put one more box into the basket. He watched the child's fingers pinch the bear's paw until the fabric bunched. "All right, girl," he whispered. "I see it." Coda didn't move, but something in her, something only handlers learn to read, eased. The message had been handed off. She had delivered it to someone who could say it aloud. Near the front registers, a cashier made a joke that didn't travel far. A toddler cried at the sight of a denied candy bar, and then forgot why. A woman in a blue sweater compared 2 brands of oatmeal with the gravity of a judge. The little piece of the world in aisle 15 held its breath anyway. Daniel didn't reach for his radio. He didn't step forward with the force of his badge. He did something smaller, and in this moment, braver. He refused to let the ordinary swallow this. He put the scene on a shelf in his mind, where he wouldn't lose it. He made room beside it for a license plate he would learn, for the sound of a car door he would recognize later, for the thread of a jacket sleeve he would follow across a parking lot. The man exhaled as if making some choice Daniel could not hear. He rolled the basket toward the mouth of the aisle. The child moved with him. The bear's face turned out toward the store, as though it were watching on her behalf. For a heartbeat, the girl's eyes found Coda. They did not widen. They did not plead. They softened, the way earth does when rain begins. A recognition passed between child and dog that did not require permission or introduction. I see you. I saw you first. Coda blinked once. If there is a prayer that belongs to dogs, it lives in that blink. The two moved on, out past the towers of cereal, into the wider light. Daniel let them go the distance between aisles. He let himself breathe again. He could feel the tremor of decision already gathering its legs under him. But that would come later. For now, he stood with Coda, in the hum and the brightness, among boxes and prices, and the small human habits of Saturday morning. He placed his palm on the dog's shoulder and felt the life there, steady as a drumbeat. "Good eyes," he said. It was thanks and promise both. Around them, the market returned to its script. No one clapped. No one knew. The world had not changed in any way that would make news. But here, among the aisles where nothing should matter, something had declared itself with a child's hand and a dog's stillness. It would be enough to begin. The hum of the supermarket pressed on, an endless rhythm of beeps and chatter. But to Daniel Ruiz, everything had narrowed to a small circle of space where Hannah stood. His eyes tracked the girl as though she were the only one moving in the entire store. She wasn't. Shoppers passed her. Carts rattled by. A worker stocked shelves with boxes that clattered softly against one another. But Hannah's stillness set her apart. It was the kind of stillness that belonged to someone waiting for permission to breathe. Her pink dress told its own story. The cotton fabric was thin, smudged with dirt along the hem. A stain darkened across the chest like it had been there for days. The shoes on her feet, scuffed white sneakers with frayed laces, looked too small, as though they belonged to last year's Hannah, not today's. Strands of blonde hair clung to her cheeks, tangled and uncombed. She clutched the teddy bear tighter than any child should need to, her knuckles pale around its worn arm. Daniel's training whispered all the textbook phrases: neglected hygiene, inappropriate clothing for season, withdrawn affect. But it was her silence that rooted him to the floor. The cashier at Register 7 leaned down, voice kind, the way people instinctively soften for children. "That's a nice bear you've got there, sweetheart. What's his name?" Hannah's head tilted, just slightly, as though the words had brushed against her. For an instant, her eyes lit, tiny sparks in gray. She opened her mouth, but no sound followed. Before the moment could grow, the man at her side moved. Dante Briggs. The tattoos curling down his arms marked him immediately, thick black lines inked into patterns that had no playfulness to them. Ivy twisted into barbs, letters in block script Daniel couldn't read from here. He carried himself like someone used to space, used to taking it, and he placed a heavy hand against Hannah's back. Not a push, not a strike, but a pressure. "She's shy," he said to the cashier, his voice too level, too smooth. It was the tone of someone closing a door without slamming it. The girl's face folded back in on itself. The faint spark vanished. She lowered her chin, burying half of it against the bear's fur. Daniel felt his jaw tighten. Beside him, Coda gave a sound low and sharp in her chest. Not a bark, not even a growl most people would notice. But Daniel knew the difference. It wasn't aggression, it was recognition. The dog had read the moment the way she read explosives buried under dirt. Danger invisible, but undeniable. "Easy, girl," Daniel whispered, his hand brushing her collar. But he didn't mean it. He didn't want her to be easy. He wanted her to confirm what his gut already screamed. His pulse climbed, steady and insistent. He knew the rules. He had repeated them enough times in training. Observation is not evidence. A gesture, a silence, a child's stiff posture. None of it was enough to detain a man in public. Not in a sleepy town where complaints were filed about dogs barking or trash cans left on the wrong side of the curb. If he acted too soon, Briggs could file against him, and the department would be forced to stand behind the complaint. Hannah could disappear before they ever had grounds to intervene. And yet if he did nothing, if he let the pair walk away, what then? The cashier smiled politely, pushing the receipt across the counter. Briggs took it, folding the bill change into his pocket. "Come on, Hannah," he said. The way he said her name made it sound borrowed. Daniel leaned casually against a rack of peanut butter jars, eyes on the labels, but every nerve pointed toward the pair. He told himself to look for what was normal. The ease of a parent with a child, the natural chatter of little voices when they ask for candy or beg for toys. But there was none of it here. Hannah never tugged his sleeve, never whined, never asked. She only followed, small and silent, teddy bear clutched like an anchor. Coda shifted her weight forward, her nose twitching, tail stiff. Daniel tightened his grip on the lead, more to steady himself than her. He thought of the body cam footage he'd reviewed late at night, old cases where a signal had been missed. A glance, a bruise, a silence. Each one a ghost in his memory. He thought of the promise he had made, not in a courtroom, not in a briefing room, but in the privacy of his own mind. Never again. But promises made in quiet are the hardest to keep when silence is all you're given. The man and child headed for the automatic doors. Glass panels slid open with a hiss, letting in the pale daylight from the lot outside. Daniel's chest tightened as the distance grew. Every step away was a step closer to losing her. Coda let out another sound, deeper this time, a vibration that ran up the leash into Daniel's hand. "Yeah," he murmured, almost to himself. "I feel it too." And then the debate sharpened in him, the seesaw of every cop who's ever stood at the thin line between instinct and evidence. Act now, and you might be wrong. Do nothing, and you might regret it forever. His breath slowed, deliberate. He thought of Hannah's small hand curling into that silent cry in aisle 15. Not once, but twice. A signal too practiced to be chance. He thought of how her face had flickered open for a heartbeat at the cashier's kind words, then shut again under Briggs's hand. That wasn't shyness. That was survival. The doors whispered shut behind them. The girl was almost gone. Daniel adjusted his stance, fingers brushing the radio at his belt. He could call it in. He could note, possible child in distress, file it in the system, let the machine grind through its steps. But machines move slowly, and sometimes children don't have time to wait. He glanced down at Coda. Her eyes hadn't left the exit. Her body hummed with alertness, the way it did when she caught a trail in the woods or sniffed fear in a missing person's clothes. Daniel felt her certainty press into him. The debate, he knew, was already decided. Still, he whispered it aloud, as if speaking would anchor him. Not letting this one go. He let the leash fall a little slack, giving Coda her head. Together, they moved toward the door, slow enough not to draw notice, steady enough to follow without losing sight. Behind them, the cashier bagged another customer's groceries. The store radio played an old song about summer. Life in Brookridge moved on. But for Daniel and Coda, the world had tilted. The girl was too quiet. And silence, Daniel thought grimly, could be louder than any scream. The sliding doors of Brookridge Market parted with their usual hiss, letting in a sharp draft of afternoon air. The tattooed man stepped out first, his stride casual, a plastic bag swinging loosely at his side. Hannah trailed after him, small legs scrambling to match his pace, her teddy bear clutched so tightly its worn ear brushed her chin. Daniel Ruiz lingered just inside the threshold, his hand resting lightly on Coda's harness. From this angle, the light from the parking lot washed Hannah in pale gray, draining what little color clung to her pink dress. She didn't look back. Children usually did, at the balloons tied to carts, at the shelves of candy bars, at strangers. Hannah moved like someone who had learned not to. The man's car was parked 3 rows down. Daniel watched him unlock a beat-up silver sedan with one key. The trunk was tied shut with fraying rope, one taillight cracked, the rear bumper sagging on one side. He opened the passenger door for Hannah, guiding her inside with a hand that hovered more like a command than an act of care. She slid across the torn seat vinyl, teddy bear still in her lap. Coda's eyes never left her. Her body leaned forward, tense, the way she did when following a scent trail that threatened to vanish. Daniel's thumb pressed against the small pad on his radio. "Unit 12 to command," he said, keeping his voice low. "Possible child distress. Suspect vehicle. Silver sedan. Mid-90s model. Plates." He narrowed his eyes, catching the numbers in the glare of sunlight. 4 NJK 52. Repeat, 4 NJK 52. Parking lot of Brookridge Market. Male adult, heavily tattooed, accompanied by juvenile female approximately 5 years old. No overt signs of abuse, but strong indicators of neglect and distress. Static crackled before the reply came. "Unit 12. Copy. Not enough to detain. Return to the station." The words were what he expected, what protocol demanded. Without a report of abduction, without visible injury, without a witness stepping forward, his hands were supposed to be tied. He stared at the car as the man slid behind the wheel. The sedan coughed to life, belching exhaust. Coda growled low, a sound almost lost beneath the engine's rattle. Daniel heard it clear. "Command, you want me to disengage?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Affirmative. Clear and return." For a long moment, Daniel stood still. He felt the heat of the sun on his neck, the cold weight of his badge against his chest. He thought of the training videos, of children who had given signals no one noticed, who vanished into file folders and unsolved cases. He thought of Hannah's tiny hand curling into that practiced cry. He looked down at Coda. The dog's amber eyes reflected the silver sedan pulling toward the lot's exit. Her tail was stiff, her head unblinking. She knew. Daniel exhaled, sharp and quiet. "We're not done," he murmured. He tugged Coda's harness gently, and they walked briskly to his patrol car. The cruiser hummed alive, dashboard lights flickering as he slid the transmission into gear. He pulled out, leaving a polite 3-car buffer between himself and the sedan. From here, he could watch without being obvious. The sedan rolled through a stop sign without pausing, its right blinker broken, clicking silently against the afternoon noise. Daniel noted every detail. The way Briggs's arm hung out the window as if bored. The way Hannah's small silhouette sat rigidly still in the passenger seat. The bear's outline faint against the glass. "Unit 12 to command," Daniel said again, his voice steady. "Continuing observation of the subject vehicle until further advised." "Unit 12, negative. Return to the station." He reached up and switched the radio to the local channel, killing the reply before it came. His pulse was steady now, but low in his stomach the dread knotted. He knew he was choosing to walk a thinner line than policy allowed. But sometimes the line itself was the problem. Coda shifted in the seat, ears pricked, her nose pressed against the passenger window, fogging a circle on the glass. Her tail gave one sharp thump against the seat, not playful, but certain. "I know," Daniel whispered. "I know." The sedan turned onto Maple Street, tires squealing faintly against the worn pavement. Daniel followed at a measured pace, keeping 2 cars and 1 truck between them. His eyes never left the license plate, repeating the numbers silently in his head like a mantra. They passed the quiet sprawl of Brookridge, brick storefronts with peeling paint, a gas station with prices chalked half-broken on the sign, a diner that smelled of coffee even from the street. Normal life went on as though Hannah didn't exist, as though no one had seen her signal. Daniel's knuckles whitened around the steering wheel. He thought of his daughter's first day of school years ago, the way she had clutched her lunchbox and waved shyly to him through the glass. If she had needed help then, if she had sent a signal, no one caught. The thought was enough. The sedan slowed, its blinker flashing left. It turned into a weathered apartment complex at the edge of town. The paint peeled in long strips, laundry lines sagged above the stairwells, and a busted grocery cart leaned against the dumpster like a forgotten relic. The car parked crookedly in front of Unit 2B. Daniel eased into the gas station lot across the street, shutting off his headlights. He sat with the engine idling low, Coda pressed forward in her seat, nose twitching. The sedan door opened. Briggs stepped out, pocketing his keys. He walked around, opened the passenger door, and bent low. Hannah slid out. Teddy bear clutched to her chest. She didn't run. She didn't skip. She followed him up the cracked stairs, vanishing behind a faded blue door marked with a peeling brass 2B. Daniel pulled his notebook from the console and scribbled furiously. Time, description, license, unit number. Every detail mattered. He tore the page free and folded it into his vest pocket. For nearly 10 minutes he waited, eyes locked on the apartment. Once, the blinds shifted. A sliver of Hannah's face peeked out, pale against the dark teddy bear still pressed close. Their eyes didn't meet. Too much distance, too much glass. But Daniel felt the recognition like a pulse. "She's still in there," he whispered. Coda pressed her paw against the window, quiet but insistent. Daniel leaned back in his seat. He should drive away, return to station, file the report that would sit in some inbox. But his body wouldn't move. His instincts wouldn't let him. "All right, girl," he said finally, his voice a vow. "This isn't over." He circled the block once, memorizing every face in the lot, every exit, every crack in the building's facade. By the time he turned the cruiser back toward the station, the promise had already settled in him. They would come back. And this time, he wouldn't let silence win. The sedan rattled its way down Maple Street like a tired animal limping home. Daniel kept 3 cars between him and Briggs, careful not to crowd, careful not to lose sight. Every turn signal, every lane change, every idle pause at a stop sign etched itself into Daniel's mind. He repeated the plate number silently, each syllable like a drumbeat. 4NJK52. Don't forget. Coda pressed against the passenger window, her nose fogging the glass in a small oval. Her ears twitched at every change in engine sound, at every slowing curve of the road. She wasn't looking at traffic. She was watching them. The sedan veered left onto the edge of town, where the neat storefronts gave way to chain-link fences and buildings that had long since lost their paint to winter storms. Daniel eased his cruiser into the lot of a gas station across the street, killed his headlights, and let the sedan clatter into the parking area of a worn-down complex. Sunset Manor Apartments. The name was a lie. The sign out front hung crooked on two rusted poles, half the letters chipped away until it read only S_Set_Ma_R. The building itself was a block of peeling beige, its siding warped like ripples in water. Windows sagged behind blinds bent and broken, their edges yellowed with grease and time. A busted grocery cart leaned against the dumpster near the entrance, one wheel permanently turned outward like a broken limb. Daniel watched as Briggs climbed out of the sedan, slamming the driver's door hard enough that the trunk rope shook. He walked around, opened the passenger door, and bent to Hannah. The little girl slid out without protest. Teddy bear still in her arms, shoes scraping across cracked pavement. She looked smaller under the harsh streetlight that flickered overhead, pale against the shadows. She didn't run, didn't tug his hand, didn't ask questions. She only followed, shoulders tight, steps measured like someone afraid of being too loud. Daniel's hand gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles paled. He didn't need Coda's confirmation, but he got it anyway. The shepherd's tail was stiff, her eyes sharp and fixed on the girl. She let out a low sound that wasn't a growl and wasn't a whimper. It was something between a note of concern Daniel had come to understand as, "Don't look away." Briggs led Hannah up the stairwell, its rail rusted through in patches. They stopped at a door on the second floor. Faded blue paint flaked away in sheets, the brass 2B hanging on by one nail, crooked like a tired smile. He fumbled with his keys, shoved the door open, and disappeared inside with the child. The door shut. Silence reclaimed the building. For nearly 5 minutes, Daniel just sat, eyes never leaving that door. The neighborhood moved sluggishly around him, voices drifting from a unit further down, the faint bark of a dog behind one of the fences, a porch light flicking on, then dying again. All of it blurred into the background. Then it happened. The blinds on the second floor shifted, just slightly, like a hesitant breath. A pale sliver of Hannah's face appeared between the bent slats. She held the bear tight against her chest, its round head half visible in the gap. Her eyes scanned the lot below, as though she were searching for something she wasn't sure she would find. When Daniel's gaze found hers, the distance made the moment fragile. She couldn't know who he was or why he was there. But the way her eyes lingered, half hope, half fear, spoke of a child reaching into the dark, desperate for someone to answer back. Daniel's throat tightened. He fought the instinct to wave, to reassure. Any movement could spook Briggs. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, only his heart moving, thudding against his ribs. Coda, as if sensing the weight of it, rose onto her front paws, nose pressed harder to the window. She didn't bark, didn't whine. She simply stared up at that window, her amber eyes steady beacons. For a flicker of a second, Hannah's expression changed. Not relief, not safety, but something softer than fear, recognition. as if she knew she hadn't imagined the moment in the supermarket. Someone had seen her. Someone had followed. Then the blinds snapped shut. The sliver of her face vanished. The window went still. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. His hand found Coda's fur, brushing once between her ears. "She's in there," he whispered, the words more for himself than the dog. "She's really in there." Coda's body remained taut, every muscle alive with purpose. She knew. Daniel pulled his notepad from the dash and scrawled furiously. "Sunset Manor Apartments. Unit 2B. Briggs, female child, 5 wires approx. Observed at window." His handwriting dug too deep into the paper, but he didn't care. Each line was a stake in the ground, something to anchor him against the helplessness curling at the edges. The cruiser's clock ticked louder than it should have. 8 minutes passed, then 10. He circled the block once, memorizing every exit point, every alley behind the building, every face that moved through the lot. A man carried groceries up to the 3rd floor. A woman dragged a bag of laundry to her car. A teenager sat on the curb, eyes glued to his phone. None of them glanced toward 2B. Daniel parked again across the street. His instincts screamed at him to act, to march up those stairs and see for himself. But rules were rules, and without more, all he had was instinct. And instinct, in the wrong hands, could ruin a case before it began. So he sat, watching, waiting. Coda finally eased down onto the passenger seat, though her gaze never left the building. Her tail thumped once against the upholstery, a single beat like a drum of determination. Daniel reached over and rested his hand on her back. The steady warmth of her body grounded him. "We'll come back," he promised softly. "This isn't the end. Not for her." The complex loomed in silence, a husk of a building holding a child who had already asked for help in the only way she knew. And Daniel knew, with a certainty that silenced every doubt. This was where the fight truly began. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the Brookridge Police Department was softer than the ones at the supermarket, but no less grating. They carried the same hollow tone, like something always buzzing just beyond hearing. Daniel Ruiz sat in the briefing room, elbows on the table, staring at the still frame on his bodycam footage. The image was grainy, washed in the sterile light of aisle 15. But there it was. A small hand, palm out, thumb folded in, 4 fingers curling down. The signal. He ran it back, pressed play, then pause again. Frame by frame, watching the moment stretch into something unbearable, Coda appeared in the corner of the shot, frozen, eyes locked on the girl. Daniel exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He had watched this 10 times already. 100 wouldn't be enough. The door opened. Sergeant Maria Torres stepped in, her presence filling the space before she said a word. She was in her 50s, hair pulled back into a tight bun that hadn't moved in 20 years of service. Her eyes were sharp, cold steel, softened only by a weathered compassion that showed up when no one expected it. She held a mug of coffee that smelled like tar, and she leaned against the table across from him. "You're still at it," she said, voice low, not judgmental. Daniel didn't look up. "It's there. You see it too." Torres's gaze flicked to the screen. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she set her coffee down and folded her arms. "I see what looks like a kid adjusting her grip on a stuffed bear," he turned sharply. "That's not what it is." Her eyes didn't waver. "And if it is, where's your report of abduction? Where's the mother? Where's the complaint? You've got nothing that holds up in court." Daniel clenched his jaw. The words were protocol, and he knew she wasn't wrong. But the rules had never felt so heavy, never so blind. "She looked right at me," he said finally, voice raw. "She made the signal twice. You think that's a coincidence?" "I think I've seen 100 kids fidget in grocery stores," Torres said. She walked around, standing over his shoulder. "You think I don't want to act? You think I don't want to storm that apartment myself? But if we move without cause, Briggs gets a lawyer, the judge throws it out, and that little girl disappears faster than you can blink. You want that on you?" The words landed, sharp and deliberate, but Daniel didn't back down. He rewound the footage again, pressed play. Pause. The tiny fingers curled inward, slow, deliberate. Not nervous energy, not a chance. He pointed to the screen. "Look at her eyes. That's not a kid fidgeting. That's a kid screaming without sound." Torres exhaled heavily, pinching the bridge of her nose. She hated being the wall between instinct and law. He knew it. She knew it. "Daniel," she said, softer now, "there are rules for a reason. You can't build a case on instinct alone." Coda lifted her head from where she'd been lying near the door. She padded closer, nails clicking against the tile, and pressed her muzzle against Daniel's knee. He reached down absently, fingers curling into her fur. The dog had no words, but her presence was weight enough. "She saw it too," Daniel murmured. "You know Coda. She doesn't freeze unless there's something real." Torres's jaw tightened. She looked at the dog, then at Daniel. For a long beat, she said nothing. Then, with a sigh, she walked back to her coffee and picked it up. "You're off duty in 20 minutes. Go home. Clear your head." It wasn't a command. It was dismissal. The conversation, as far as the department was concerned, was over. But Daniel stayed in that room long after Torres left. He ran the footage again and again until the screen burned into his vision, until the hum of the lights above seemed to pulse with each curl of Hannah's fingers. He thought of her pale face behind the blinds at Sunset Manor, that brief glance, like a lighthouse flashing once through storm clouds. He thought of the silence in that apartment complex parking lot, of the peeling paint on the door of Unit 2B. No complaints, no cause. The rules said he was done. But Coda nudged him again, harder this time, pressing her head against his hand until he looked down at her. Her eyes were unblinking, steady as they'd been in the store. She hadn't forgotten. Neither had he. Daniel shut the laptop with a sharp snap. The sound echoed too loud in the empty room. He slid the bodycam drive into his vest pocket, grabbed his notes, and stood. His chair scraped across the tile as he pushed it back. At the door, he paused, looked back at the black screen, at the ghost of the moment still etched in his mind. "No complaint," he whispered. "No cause." He touched the badge on his chest, the metal cold under his fingers. "But there's a promise." Coda wagged her tail once, slow, deliberate, as though sealing the vow. Daniel turned off the lights and stepped out into the hall. He knew Torres would call him reckless. She'd tell him he was chasing shadows, but some shadows hid children, and some promises weighed more than protocol. He wasn't done. Not while a little girl clutched her teddy bear behind bent blinds, waiting for someone to see her. The night air settled over Brookridge with the kind of chill that seeped past the skin and into the bones. Sunset Manor stood like a tired sentinel at the edge of town, its walls cracked, its paint shedding in strips that flapped with the wind. The glow of a single streetlight sputtered, buzzing like an insect caught in its own hum, throwing more shadow than light across the cracked parking lot. Daniel Ruiz sat in his cruiser, engine off, headlights dark. Coda lay in the passenger seat beside him, her breath fogging faint patches against the glass. The silence pressed heavy, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the metallic groan of pipes somewhere deep in the building. From this vantage point across the street, he had a clear view of Unit 2B. The blue door at the top of the stairwell was still, blinds drawn tight. But stillness didn't mean safety. He'd learned that lesson too many times before. He shifted in his seat, his shoulders stiff. The clock on the dash ticked over to 11:47 p.m. His shift had ended hours ago. Officially, he wasn't supposed to be here. Command had told him to disengage. Sergeant Torres had reminded him of rules and cause. By staying, he was putting himself squarely outside the bounds of procedure. But rules hadn't seen Hannah's hand signal. Rules hadn't looked into those pale eyes behind the blinds. Coda lifted her head suddenly, ears pricking forward. Her gaze cut straight to the second-floor window. Daniel followed it, his own breath holding, waiting. The blinds stirred, just faintly, just for a moment, enough to suggest movement inside. "You smell her, don't you, girl?" Daniel whispered. Coda gave a low rumble deep in her chest, her tail stiff against the seat. Not a growl of threat, an alert, an answer. Daniel reached out, resting his palm gently against her back. Her muscles thrummed with focus. He thought of his daughter again. How many years had it been since she clutched a stuffed toy that way, white-knuckled and fierce, like it was the only anchor in a storm? Kids didn't hide behind silence, unless silence was safer than sound. Across the lot, a couple argued near a dented pickup, their words sharp before fading into laughter that sounded too thin. A teenager cut across on a bike, wheels squeaking, hood pulled low. Then the world went quiet again, leaving only the hum of his own pulse and Coda's steady breathing. Daniel reached for his notepad, jotting down times, movements, anything he could later put into words that mattered. Lights flicked on in 2B at 10:32, off again at 10:41. Blinds shifted 11:47. The child is likely still present. His pen dug grooves into the paper. The silence in the cruiser thickened. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that asked questions he couldn't yet answer. What if he was wrong? What if Hannah was simply shy? Simply quiet? What if Briggs really was just watching a neighbor's child for a few days? Acting on instinct could mean destroying lives, tarnishing his badge, losing the trust of a department that already looked sideways at him for being too driven, too stubborn. But then he remembered the burned photo in the trash, the crayon drawing, the look in Hannah's eyes when she peeked through the blinds. Those weren't the marks of a child just shy. Daniel leaned back against the seat, eyes never leaving that window. "We're staying," he said aloud, his voice a low vow. "As long as it takes." Coda laid her head on his thigh, amber eyes still fixed on the building. Her presence was a tether, keeping him from drifting into doubt. The minutes dragged into hours. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m. A car backfired somewhere down Maple Street. Daniel sipped stale coffee from a paper cup, the taste bitter on his tongue, his body tired, but his mind sharper than ever. Fatigue had no place here. At 1:17, Coda stiffened again, ears pitched forward, nose quivering against the glass. Daniel followed her gaze. The blinds moved, more pronounced this time. For the briefest heartbeat, a shadow crossed behind them. Small, too small to be Briggs. His chest tightened. "She's there," he murmured. Coda's tail thumped once, sharp, like a gavel hitting wood. Confirmation. Daniel scribbled the time in his notes, his hand shaking. Every instinct told him to act, to get out of the cruiser, to climb those steps and knock until someone answered. But instinct wasn't enough. Not yet. He needed more. He needed to build a trail of evidence no judge could ignore. Still, the longer he sat, the heavier the weight grew. The knowledge that a little girl was just yards away, locked behind walls, waiting. Maybe awake, maybe clutching her bear in the dark, maybe wondering if the world had seen her at all. Daniel leaned forward, resting his arms on the wheel, his forehead dropping against his hands. His whisper was a prayer, more than a decision. We stay. We don't walk away. Not this time. Coda shifted closer, pressing her head firmly against his arm. Her warmth steadied him, her silence answering his vow. Together, they sat in the heavy night, the weight of rules against instinct pressing hard. Across the lot, Sunset Manor kept its secrets. But Daniel knew one thing with unshakable certainty. He wasn't leaving. Not while Hannah was still behind those blinds. The stairwell of Sunset Manor smelled of bleach and something older that bleach couldn't cover. Mildew sunk deep into wood, smoke trapped in paint. Every step creaked under Daniel's boots as he climbed beside Sergeant Maria Torres. The late afternoon sun filtered weakly through the grime-streaked windows, throwing pale rectangles on the peeling walls. Coda padded between them, her nails clicking softly against the warped linoleum. She didn't look at Torres, didn't look at Daniel. Her eyes were already locked upward toward the faded blue door at the end of the hall. Unit 2B. "Remember," Torres said, voice low but firm. "This is a routine welfare check. We ask, we observe, but we don't accuse. You get one look inside, maybe 2 minutes tops. You push harder than that. Briggs has us on harassment." Daniel nodded, though his jaw was tight. He had been waiting for this moment since the supermarket, and patience was running thin. "Understood," he said, though his tone betrayed the storm beneath. Torres shot him a look. "I mean it, Ruiz. Rules keep cases from falling apart in court. You want to help that girl, you do it right." He swallowed hard, forcing calm. "We'll do it right." They reached the end of the hall. The door to 2B leaned on sagging hinges, the brass numbers hanging crooked. Daniel could almost feel the weight of Hannah behind it, the way she'd peeked through the blinds, clutching her bear. He glanced down at Coda. The shepherd was perfectly still, ears pitched, muscles taut as if carved from stone. Torres stepped forward and knocked 2 sharp raps. The sound echoed down the hallway. Silence followed. She knocked again. "Metro Police Department, routine community check." Footsteps shuffled inside. A pause, then the clink of a chain sliding. The door cracked open 3 inches. Dante Briggs filled the gap. Up close, Daniel noted details he hadn't from the parking lot. Late 30s, beard patchy and unkempt, tattoos inked in a lattice up both arms. His eyes flicked over them, calculating. He leaned his shoulder against the frame, blocking their view of the interior. "Officers," he said, voice flat, edged with suspicion. "Something wrong?" "Not at all," Torres replied smoothly. "We've had a few reports of unusual activity in the area. Just making sure everything's all right with residents." Briggs shrugged, a gesture too casual to be natural. "Everything's fine here." Daniel tilted his head, trying to see past him. The slice of the apartment visible through the gap told a story. Bare walls, a sagging couch with no blankets, a TV perched on an overturned crate. No toys, no shoes, no color that suggested a child lived there. "Are you living here alone?" Torres asked lightly, though the weight in her gaze was unmistakable. Briggs hesitated. "Not exactly. I'm watching my friend's kid, just temporary." Daniel's pulse quickened. He kept his tone neutral. "What's her name?" "Lily," Briggs answered quickly, too quickly. Coda let out a soft whine, her nose lifting toward the crack in the door. Daniel placed a steadying hand on her back, but she didn't move. Her body hummed with quiet insistence. "And is Lily home right now?" Torres asked. "She's napping," Briggs said, his posture tightening. "Mind if we say a quick hello when she wakes up?" Daniel added, his voice calm but edged with steel. Briggs shook his head. "She doesn't like strangers. Gets nervous." "You know how kids are." Daniel's eyes narrowed. I do. Torres slipped a business card from her pocket and extended it through the crack. Well, if you or Lily need anything at all, give us a call. We're around all the time. Briggs stared at the card, reluctant, before finally taking it between two fingers. Sure thing. The door closed. The chain slid back into place with a metallic scrape. For a moment, the hallway was silent, except for the steady thrum of Daniel's pulse. He stared at the door, willing it to open again. But it didn't. Back in the stairwell, Torres exhaled, rubbing the bridge of her nose. We didn't see anything. Daniel shook his head, his jaw set. We saw everything. Torres frowned at him. Don't start. No toys, no sound, no sign of a kid actually living there. He stood in the doorway, like a wall. Daniel's voice grew sharper. She's in there, Sergeant. I can feel it. And so can Coda. As if on cue, Coda gave another low whine, looking back up the stairwell toward 2B. Torres's eyes softened, but her tone stayed hard. Instinct doesn't hold in court, Ruiz. We follow procedure. Daniel didn't argue further, not aloud. But inside, the choice had already been made. He glanced back at the door one last time. Behind it, he imagined Hannah curled on a couch too big for her small frame, teddy bear pressed tight, waiting for someone to knock harder, waiting for someone to see. Daniel's hand tightened on Coda's harness. We're not finished here, he whispered. Coda's ears twitched. Her gaze stayed fixed on that door as though she could see straight through it. And in the silence of Sunset Manor, with the rules pressing down on him and the weight of a child's signal echoing in his memory, Daniel knew the truth. Officially, the welfare check was over. But in his heart, the real investigation had only just begun. The door to Unit 2B shut with a metallic scrape, the chain sliding back into place like a lock sealing a secret. The hallway seemed emptier for it, as if the air itself exhaled once Briggs had shut them out. Daniel Ruiz stood frozen for a moment, his hand hovering near Coda's collar, eyes lingering on the cracked paint of the door. He replayed the fragments of what he had seen. The bare couch, the TV balanced on a crate, the yellowed walls stripped of any trace of a child's presence. No scattered crayons, no tiny shoes kicked off in a hurry, no blanket patterned with cartoon characters draped across the sofa. Nothing. The silence inside had been too complete. Not the peaceful quiet of a home where a child naps in safety, but the suffocating kind that swallows sound on purpose. He knew the difference. Behind him, Torres tucked her business card back into her pocket after pulling a spare. She'd slipped one to Briggs, calm, professional, the way the job demanded. Daniel recognized the act for what it was. Not trust, but a breadcrumb. A reminder that the police had knocked once and could knock again. Come on, Torres said softly, jerking her chin toward the stairwell. Daniel hesitated, then gave a gentle tug on Coda's lead. The shepherd resisted at first, her nose pointed toward the door, ears locked in that same focused posture. Then she moved reluctantly, padding with him down the warped steps. Her nails clicked against the peeling linoleum, each sound echoing in the too quiet building. At the bottom of the stairwell, Daniel paused again. Coda stopped beside him, then turned and pressed a paw against the step, as if asking to go back up. Her amber eyes flicked toward him, steady and insistent. I know, he murmured, crouching to rub her head. Her fur was warm under his hand, her body tense with what she had felt behind that door. I know. Torres waited at the exit, holding the door open. The cold air from outside slipped in, carrying the faint smell of cigarette smoke and stale cooking oil from the units above. She watched him quietly, her expression somewhere between sympathy and command. "Ruiz," she said, when he finally met her eyes, "you can't let your instincts write the report for you. You saw the same thing I did. An empty room, and a man who didn't want us inside. That's suspicion. Nothing more." Daniel straightened, but his jaw stayed tight. There was nothing for her in there. No toys, no food on the counter, no child's presence, just bare walls and excuses. Torres exhaled. "I don't disagree, but absence doesn't hold up as evidence. You know that as well as I do." The weight of her words pressed heavy, but it didn't erase what he'd seen, or rather, what he hadn't. Outside, the evening light had already begun to fade, casting long shadows across the lot. The busted grocery cart leaned against the dumpster like a forgotten sentinel. The wind stirred wrappers across the cracked pavement, whispering through the metal railing of the stairwell. Coda stopped just short of the cruiser, her body angled back toward the stairwell. She pawed once at the concrete, then looked up at Daniel, with a sound low in her throat. Uneasy. Alert. Daniel crouched beside her again. He'd learned long ago that Coda didn't waste signals. "She knows," he said quietly. Torres unlocked the cruiser and slid into the driver's side, calling out, "We did our part. Now we let the system do theirs. Write up the welfare check, file the notes. If something's there, it'll come out." Daniel stood, his hand still resting on Coda's harness. He looked back up at the faded blue door of Unit 2B, its peeling paint flaking in strips under the dying sun. He imagined Hannah inside, clutching her teddy bear, waiting in the silence that spoke louder than any scream. He felt it again. That gap. The space between what protocol demanded and what instinct refused to ignore. Coda's ears twitched. She gave another uneasy whine, this one shorter, sharper, her paw lifting against the stairwell step, as if she wanted to climb back up. Daniel whispered, "You're right, girl. Something's missing. Too much is missing." The door of the cruiser slammed as Torres settled in, ready to leave. Daniel lingered a moment longer, eyes fixed on the window above. He thought he saw movement. Just the blinds shifting, maybe nothing more. Or maybe a child still awake, still watching, still hoping someone would notice. The rules told him to walk away, but the silence in his chest told him the truth. He wasn't done. Not yet. The night had settled thick over Brookridge, the kind of darkness that pressed close and heavy, muffling sound and swallowing light. The street lamp above the dumpster behind Sunset Manor flickered intermittently, throwing the lot into alternating slices of orange glow and deep shadow. Daniel Ruiz stood with his collar turned up against the chill, breath clouding faintly in the air. He should have been home. Paperwork done. Case closed, at least on paper. But instinct wouldn't let him walk away. Not after the silence of Unit 2B. Not after Coda's unease at the stairwell. Coda moved ahead of him, nose low to the ground, her body taut with purpose. She wasn't sniffing for food scraps or rodents. Daniel knew that rhythm too well. This was something different, focused, deliberate. The shepherd's nails clicked against the cracked pavement as she rounded the dumpster, her movements sharp and certain. "Easy, girl," Daniel murmured, though he didn't mean to stop her. He only wanted to steady himself. The dumpster lid creaked as Coda pawed against it, the metal groaning like an old hinge. She nosed the gap until Daniel stepped forward, pulling out a pen to lift the lid without touching the grime. The smell hit immediately. Rot from takeout boxes, stale beer, the sour tang of bleach-soaked rags. But beneath it, something acrid and sharper, the faint char of burned paper. Coda pressed closer, tail stiff, her muzzle dipping into the heap until she gave a short, urgent bark. Daniel's pulse kicked. He reached in, pushing aside greasy cartons until his fingers brushed the edge of something charred. He pulled it free, carefully. A photograph, its corners blackened, edges curled from heat. The middle had survived enough to tell its story. A woman with blonde hair, smiling, her arms wrapped around a little girl with the same pale curls, the same wide eyes. Hannah. The teddy bear visible in her arms, fresher, newer, before its ear was flattened with clutching. Daniel stared at the image, his chest tightening. Someone had tried to burn this, to erase it. "Jesus," he whispered. He angled it toward the weak glow of the street lamp, studying the lines of the woman's face. She looked young, mid-20s maybe, tired around the eyes, but smiling with everything she had. Her smile was for the girl, not the camera. Coda whined softly, as if confirming what Daniel already knew. This wasn't trash. This was evidence. He crouched again, gloved hand digging deeper, until his fingers brushed something waxy. A crumpled sheet of paper, smeared but intact. He unfolded it gently. A drawing. Child's crayon strokes, crude but unmistakable. A house with a roof, scribbled in green. A stick figure girl in pink, small and alone. And beside her, towering above, an enormous figure scrawled in black crayon with angry red eyes carved into its face. The red lines were thick, pressed into the paper so hard they tore slightly through. Daniel held the drawing steady in his hands, his stomach tightening. He didn't need training manuals to tell him what this was. Kids didn't always speak their fear in words. They spoke in pictures, in the colors they chose, in the shadows they drew bigger than anything else on the page. Hannah had spoken. She had told her story in red crayon and angry eyes. Daniel leaned against the dumpster, the weight of it pressing into him. He imagined her sitting on the bare floor of that apartment, crayons scattered at her feet, scribbling the only language she could use to describe what towered over her. Coda pressed her head against his arm, grounding him in the moment. He looked down at her, at the steady certainty in her amber eyes. "You were right," he murmured. "You knew." For a moment, the noise of the world faded, and all that remained was the picture, the photo, and the certainty that they weren't wrong. Daniel slipped both into a plastic evidence sleeve he kept in his vest. His hands shook slightly as he sealed it. The weight of what he carried wasn't heavy, but it felt monumental. This wasn't courtroom proof, not yet. But it was enough to silence doubt, enough to confirm instinct, enough to tell him Hannah's silence hadn't been imagined, that her hand signal hadn't been a mistake. It was real, all of it. Daniel exhaled, long and slow, staring up at the broken blinds of 2B. Somewhere behind that glass, Hannah was waiting. Waiting in silence, waiting with fear, waiting with hope, too fragile to carry alone. The rules would say to file the evidence, to let the system crawl forward, to wait for a complaint that might never come. But Daniel knew the truth. Sometimes justice started with a whisper in the dark. Sometimes it started with a dog pressing her paw against a stairwell step. He glanced at Coda, who sat now at his side, posture regal, steady, her gaze fixed again on the window above. Her tail swept the pavement once, a low sound in her throat that wasn't warning, wasn't relief, but something in between. Daniel reached down and scratched behind her ear. "We've got her voice now," he said. His own voice was rough but steadier for saying it aloud. She spoke. "We just have to make sure they listen." He tucked the evidence folder close against his chest, then glanced back at the building. The night seemed heavier now, as if the apartment itself resisted the truth leaking out of its walls. Daniel didn't flinch. He had proof enough for his instincts. And instincts, sharpened by silence and backed by Coda's certainty, were sometimes all that saved lives. He opened the cruiser door, Coda leaping in beside him. As the engine rumbled to life, Daniel cast one last look at Unit 2B. The blinds stayed shut. But he knew Hannah was there. And now, so did the world. The bell above the door of Maria's diner jingled as Daniel pushed inside, the warm air washing over him with the scent of fried bacon and fresh coffee. The place hadn't changed in 20 years. Red vinyl booths, patched with duct tape, laminated menus sticky at the corners, a jukebox in the corner that hadn't worked since Clinton was president. The hum of the overhead lights blended with the hiss of a fryer in the back. Daniel slid into a booth by the window, his back to the wall out of habit. Coda settled at his feet, stretching out on the scuffed linoleum, her amber eyes scanning the room once before resting steady on the door. She always did that, watched the exits like it was her sworn duty. Maria herself shuffled over, hair piled high in a messy bun, pen tucked behind her ear. "Evening, detective," she said, though he wasn't technically a detective. In a small town like Brookridge, people used titles the way they used nicknames, half habit, half respect. "The usual?" "Coffee," Daniel said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Black, strong," she smirked. "Aren't you worried you'll never sleep again?" "I'm not sleeping much anyway," he admitted. Maria nodded knowingly and disappeared toward the counter. Daniel leaned back, pulling his notepad from his vest pocket. The burned photo, the crayon drawing, they were locked in evidence sleeves back in his cruiser, but their images were burned into his mind. He jotted thoughts while they were still fresh, bullet points that looked more like confessions than observations. No toys, no sound, half-burned photo, child's drawing =sign fear, silence =sign survival. He'd just started sketching the crude outline of Briggs's face, broad forehead, thick tattoos curling down his arms, when he heard them. Two older women in the booth behind him, voices carrying the tone of gossip softened by concern. "That little blonde girl," one of them said, her voice sharp with memory. "At Suds Bubbles, just yesterday. Sat there with that man. Wouldn't say a word." Daniel froze, his pen hovering above paper. The other woman clucked her tongue. "I saw her too. Sweet-looking thing, but she held that teddy bear like her life depended on it. Didn't move the whole time I was folding my laundry. He barely spoke to her either. Just sat there scrolling on his phone. Didn't even look at her." Daniel's pulse quickened. He turned slightly in his seat, his ear tilted back toward them. Coda stirred beneath the table, sensing his shift in focus. "Something wasn't right," the first woman continued. "Kids that age don't sit that still. They run, they chatter, they spill juice all over your clean clothes. But her? Nothing. Just silence. Like she was afraid if she moved, something bad would happen." The second woman sighed. 30 years I taught kindergarten. I know when a child's shutting down. And that little girl, she's shutting down." Daniel closed his notepad slowly. He turned in his seat, offering a polite smile. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice careful, respectful. "Sorry to interrupt. I couldn't help but overhear. You mentioned a little girl." The two women looked up, startled, but not offended. Their eyes flicked to the badge clipped to his belt, then softened. "Yes, officer," the first said. "At the laundromat Wednesday afternoon. She was with that man, tattoos up and down his arms. It looked rough. She never spoke a word." Daniel nodded slowly, heart hammering. "Did she look hurt? Any bruises? Anything obvious?" The second woman shook her head. "No, not hurt, just gone inside herself. She kept her eyes down the whole time. When I smiled at her, she didn't even flinch. Like she couldn't risk it." Coda gave a low sound under the table, almost a sigh. Daniel reached down, brushing his hand along her back, grounding himself. "Did you notice anything else?" he pressed gently. "What they were carrying, how he treated her?" The first woman frowned, thinking hard. "He bought her a soda, I think, set it on the table, never opened it for her. She just sat there, hugging that bear, staring at the cap, like she didn't dare ask for help." Daniel scribbled it down, every detail etching deeper into the case he was building in his head. The second woman leaned forward, her voice softer now. "Officer, I don't know what her situation is, but I've seen enough kids in my lifetime to know she's not okay. You understand me? That child isn't okay." Daniel met her gaze, the sincerity in her eyes mirroring the conviction already burning in his own. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I promise you, she's not invisible." Both women nodded, visibly relieved to be heard. They returned to their pie and coffee, though their conversation faded to murmurs now, leaving Daniel with the weight of their words. Maria returned with his coffee, setting it on the table. "Looks like you found yourself a case in here," she said wryly, nodding toward the women behind him. Daniel wrapped his hands around the mug, the steam rising into his face. "More like the case found me." He glanced down at Coda. She had shifted to face the door again, but her ears flicked every so often, as though still tuned to the voices that had just confirmed what they both already knew. The teddy bear, the silence, the fear that lived not in bruises, but in the absence of laughter. Daniel took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitterness anchor him. He didn't have proof the courts would accept, not yet, but he had witnesses. He had Coda. He had instincts sharpened by too many nights where silence had meant loss. Setting the mug down, he whispered, just loud enough for Coda to hear, "We're not walking away, girl. Not now." Her tail thumped once against the floor, steady, like punctuation on his vow. Outside, the neon "open" sign in Maria's window buzzed faintly, its red letters glowing against the dark street. But inside the diner, Daniel felt the light of something else. Confirmation. He wasn't chasing ghosts. He wasn't imagining signals. The voices of strangers had just given Hannah's silence a chorus. And now, Daniel thought grimly, the fight to save her had officially begun. Daniel's apartment was dark when he stepped inside, the kind of quiet that carried the weight of long absences. He flicked the switch, flooding the living room with pale light from the ceiling fixture. The bulb buzzed faintly, casting shadows across the cluttered desk by the window. Coda trotted in ahead of him, her nails clicking against the hardwood floor. She gave a cursory scan of the space, nose lifting, ears pivoting, before circling to her corner near the bookshelf. There, her medals gleamed faintly on the wall above her bed, ribbons and brass discs marking years of service, each one polished but left simple, unadorned. They weren't decorations to her. They were pauses in a life built on duty. Daniel set his jacket aside and dropped his notepad on the table. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring at the wall opposite the couch. It was blank, bare white paint, empty, a space begging to be filled. He moved quickly, pulling pushpins, tape, and a stack of sticky notes from the drawer. One by one, he spread his evidence across the wall. The half-burned photo, sealed in its plastic sleeve, pinned at the top. The crayon drawing beneath it, crude and heavy with its red-eyed figure. A sketch of the sedan, plate numbers scrawled in his quick hand. Times, dates, sightings, notes from the diner overheard conversation, laundromat, soda untouched, teddy bear clutched. He stepped back, arms folded, studying the patchwork like a general surveying a battlefield. On the left side, he started to build a timeline. First, the supermarket. Hannah with the bear, the silent signal. Then the checkout line. Briggs's hand heavy on her back. The parking lot. The sedan pulling away. Sunset Manor. Blinds cracked just enough to reveal a child's face pressed against glass. Below that, witness statements from the diner. The laundromat. Hannah silent and withdrawn. Layer by layer, the wall filled with Hannah's life as he had pieced it together, scraps of truth taped together with stubborn faith. Coda had settled by her corner, head resting on her paws. Her eyes stayed half-lidded but alert, tracking him with every step. Above her, the medals glinted faintly, silent reminders of battles fought and won. Daniel glanced at them once, then back to his wall. "You earned every one of those," he murmured, pacing. "And now you're about to earn one more." He stopped, pulled a sticky note from the pad, and pressed it onto the center of the board. He wrote one word in bold letters, underlined twice. Watch. It was the heart of it all. That was what Hannah had asked in the only language she had. That was what Daniel had promised, silently and out loud. That was what Coda had done in every moment since aisle 15. He stood back, chest tight. The wall was no longer empty. It breathed with her story, though she had never spoken a word. Coda shifted, letting out a low sigh. She rolled onto her side, her body brushing the small box where Daniel kept her service harness. Her paw rested just beneath the medals, as though claiming them even in sleep. Daniel paced again, his footsteps uneven. Every detail clawed at him, the way Briggs had stood in the doorway like a guard, the lack of toys or food, the silence too complete. The drawing haunted him most of all. He could almost see Hannah pressing down on the crayon, harder and harder until the paper tore. Children didn't invent monsters without cause. He scribbled more notes, pinning them quickly. No records of school enrollment. No pediatric files under Hannah's name. Mother, missing, possibly in danger. The board became a mosaic of questions and fragments, each piece shouting the same truth. Hannah wasn't safe. Hours passed, unnoticed. Midnight crept in. Outside, the street was silent except for the occasional hum of a passing car. Inside, the apartment pulsed with Daniel's determination. His coffee went cold on the counter, untouched. Finally, he stopped pacing. His shoulders ached, his eyes burned, but the wall was almost full. He looked at it once more. The photo, the drawing, the notes, the single word at the center. Watch. Coda stirred, her ears flicking at the sound of his sigh. She lifted her head, blinked at him, then at the board. Slowly, she rose, padded across the room, and sat beside him. Together, they stared at the wall in silence. Daniel reached down, resting his hand on her head. Her fur was warm, steady. She leaned into his palm, solid as stone. "We've got enough to keep going," he whispered. "Enough to know. We just have to make them believe it." Coda's tail swept once against the floor. For the first time that night, Daniel let his body relax, even slightly. He sank into the couch, eyes still fixed on the wall. He knew he wouldn't sleep, but he didn't need to. The wall was his map, his proof, his vow. And as long as it stood, Hannah wasn't invisible. The apartment had gone still. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old wall clock, each second dragging like a footstep down an empty hallway. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, boots still on, staring at the wall of notes and photos across the room. Even here, in the dim light spilling from the street lamp outside, Hannah's crayon drawing glared back at him. The stick figure girl, small and fragile, the towering shadow with its angry red eyes. He rubbed his face with both hands, exhaustion settling into his bones. He told himself he'd rest, just for a little while. He pulled his jacket tighter, leaned back against the headboard, and closed his eyes. Sleep came, but not peace. The first dream was familiar, one that had stalked him for years. A boy named Trevor, 7 years old, vanished from his front yard on a summer afternoon. Daniel had been a rookie then, brimming with faith in the system, certain that persistence always won. He remembered standing at the parents' door, telling them to hold hope, that the department had every resource at play. Weeks later, when Trevor's shoe washed up in the river, Daniel stopped knocking on doors and started living with ghosts. The dream twisted. Now it was Emily, 9 years old, taken from a school bus stop. Daniel saw himself at the scene, the yellow tape snapping in the wind, the mother's scream so raw it seemed to peel the air apart. They'd found Emily months later, alive but broken in ways no report could capture. He remembered kneeling beside her in the hospital room, swearing to himself that he would never miss another sign. But dreams didn't honor promises. They replayed the failures, looped them, stitched them into new horrors. Hannah appeared now, her face pale in the supermarket aisle, teddy bear crushed to her chest. She raised her hand, thumb tucked, fingers curling, the silent cry for help. But in the dream, Daniel didn't see it in time. Briggs pulled her away, the aisle stretching longer and longer, until she vanished into shadow. The sound of the chain sliding on the door of Unit 2B echoed louder than thunder. He tried to run, but his feet wouldn't move. Coda was barking somewhere behind him, sharp, urgent, but he couldn't reach her. He couldn't reach Hannah. The crayon drawing flared in his vision again, the red eyes bleeding across the page, swallowing the small stick figure whole. Daniel jerked awake. His chest heaved, shirt clinging damp with sweat. The room was dark, lit only by the faint orange glow of the street lamp outside. His throat felt raw, as if he'd been shouting in his sleep. Coda was standing beside the bed, muzzle pressed against his shoulder. She nudged him once, then again, insistent but gentle. Her eyes were steady, unblinking, as though anchoring him back to reality. Daniel pressed a hand to her head, his palm trembling against her fur. "I'm here," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if it was for her or himself. The dream clung like smoke. Faces of children, past and present, swirled in the corners of his mind. The weight of promises broken and promises yet to be kept pressed hard against his chest. Coda nudged him again, this time with a soft whine that cut deeper than words. Daniel swallowed hard, his voice low and hoarse. "Not again," he murmured, shaking his head. "Not this one. She doesn't get lost. Not while I'm still breathing." Coda's tail gave a single thump against the floorboards. She stayed pressed against him, steady and warm, as if absorbing the remnants of the nightmare. Daniel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He knew sleep wouldn't return. Not tonight. Maybe not for many nights. But that was fine. Sleep was overrated when a child's life was on the line. His gaze shifted back to the wall of notes and photos. The word "watch" glared at him from its sticky note center, illuminated faintly by the streetlight. It wasn't just a command anymore. It was a vow. Daniel exhaled, slow and deliberate. He rubbed Coda's ears, grounding himself in her quiet loyalty. "We won't fail her," he whispered. "Not again." And in the silence of the night, broken only by Coda's steady breathing, Daniel made the same promise he had made in his dream, but this time he made it wide awake. Hannah would not become another ghost. The community center smelled of crayons, paper, and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights, buzzed overhead, casting their tired glow on bulletin boards crowded with flyers, support groups, hotlines, parenting classes. Daniel Ruiz had been here before, but never with a folder that weighed this heavy in his hands. At his side, Coda padded quietly, her vest unmarked, nails tapping softly against linoleum. She moved like a shadow with purpose. A receptionist directed them to the last office on the left. The door was cracked. Inside sat Vanessa Reyes. In her late 30s, hair tied in a loose bun, sleeves rolled, Vanessa's office was a map of her work. Files stacked high, children's storybooks jammed into a shelf, a box of stuffed animals in the corner. She looked up as Daniel knocked. "Ruiz," she said, setting down her pen. "Lately it's either trouble or stubbornness." "Both," he admitted, stepping in. Coda settled by the chair, watchful. Vanessa leaned back, arms crossed. "What's on your mind?" Daniel opened the folder, laying out a half-burned photograph and a crayon drawing. He didn't explain. The images spoke first. Vanessa studied the photo. A smiling woman, a little girl, clutching a teddy bear. The edges were charred, an attempt at erasure. Then the drawing. A crude house, a stick-figure girl, and a looming shadow with angry red eyes. Silence thickened as she traced the lines. Finally, she said quietly, "This isn't scribbling. This is disclosure. Children draw what they can't say. This is fear." Daniel exhaled. She made the hand signal in the store, then at the blinds. "I thought maybe I imagined it. But then this." He tapped the folder. "I can't let it go." "You know protocol," Vanessa replied. "Complaints, documentation, corroboration. If I push too fast, Briggs can shut the door or disappear with her." "So we wait?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "No. We approach each other carefully. I'll make an informal visit. Clipboard. Calm voice. If she shows me anything, we'll have grounds to escalate." Daniel's voice dropped. "She's running out of time." "I know," Vanessa said, softer now. "But if we mishandle this, she's gone." Coda's ears flicked. Daniel glanced at her. "She knows." Vanessa gave the faintest smile. "Better instincts than half my caseworkers." Daniel asked, "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," she nodded. When Daniel left, Coda pressed close. Outside he crouched, touching his forehead to her muzzle. "Tomorrow, girl. We get closer." The next afternoon, Daniel sat in his unmarked cruiser 2 buildings down from Sunset Manor, eyes fixed on Unit 2B. The apartment building sagged in daylight, paint peeling, blinds crooked, bikes rusting in weeds. Coda sat rigid beside him, gaze locked on the same door. Across the lot, Vanessa approached with her clipboard tucked under her arm, Idaho badge clipped neatly. She climbed the stairs with steady steps, knocking 3 times at Briggs's door. It opened a crack. Briggs filled the frame, tattoos down his forearms, eyes wary. "Mr. Briggs? I'm Vanessa Reyes with CPS, Standard Welfare Check. May I come in?" "She's napping," he muttered. "That's fine," she said smoothly. "Just a quick visit." For a moment, Daniel thought he'd slam the door. Instead, Briggs sighed, unlatched the chain, and stepped back. Inside, the blinds were drawn, the air thick with stale smoke and reheated food. No toys, no books, no color of a child's life. Vanessa took it all in quietly. "Where's Lily?" "Back room," Briggs gestured. Vanessa moved slowly, knocking softly at the bedroom door. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Vanessa. Can I say hello?" A pause, then the door cracked. A little girl's face peeked out, blonde hair tangled, cheeks smudged with dirt, eyes far too old for her years. In her arms, a battered teddy bear. "Is that your bear?" Vanessa asked gently. The girl whispered, "Mr. Patches." Vanessa smiled softly. "That's a brave name." Hannah's eyes flicked up, full of silent fear. Briggs's voice cut in behind them. "She's shy." Vanessa kept her tone even. "That's all right. Do you like living here, sweetheart?" Hannah's mouth trembled. Her eyes darted to Briggs, then back to her bear. She whispered one word, so faint it nearly vanished. "No." The sound was small, but it landed like thunder. Vanessa's chest tightened. She kept her smile, nodding at the bear. "Mr. Patches is lucky to have you." Hannah slipped back into the room, the door closing softly. Vanessa rose, face composed, voice steady as she thanked Briggs and handed him her card. Outside, the stale air gave way to sunlight. She walked back to the cruiser. Daniel leaned forward, searching her face. Coda pressed between the seats, tail still, waiting. Vanessa slid in, hands gripping her clipboard. Her voice was quiet, but resolute. "She's there, and she's afraid." Daniel's jaw set. Coda whined low. "She whispered about her teddy bear," Vanessa continued. "And when I asked if she liked living there, she said no." The silence stretched, heavy and certain. Daniel's voice was steel. "Then we don't stop." Vanessa nodded. "We escalate." She laid the drawing on the console between them, the red-eyed figure glaring from the page. "This is enough for me to move forward, and once I escalate, I don't stop." Daniel's exhaustion gave way to fire. "Then we're in this together." "Together," Vanessa confirmed. Coda gave a soft chuff, pressing her head against Daniel's shoulder. They parked across from Sunset Manor that night, headlights off. Gas station neon buzzed nearby. Vanessa sat with her clipboard shut tight, Daniel with his fists clenched on the wheel. Coda hadn't shifted, eyes fixed on the apartment. "She's not safe," Vanessa said finally. "I knew it," Daniel muttered. "She didn't say much," Vanessa went on. "But what she did say was enough. And her eyes, I've seen that look. That's survival, not living." Daniel's knuckles whitened. "Then we get her out." "We need a court order," Vanessa cautioned. "If I file in the morning, we might have one by afternoon." "Too long," Daniel hissed. Vanessa didn't argue. She placed the crayon drawing on the console again. "A judge won't be able to look away from this." Daniel met her eyes. "Then tomorrow we move." Coda pressed forward, her breath warm against his arm. "Tonight we watch," Daniel added, eyes on 2B. "If he tries to move her, I want to know first." "Don't be reckless," Vanessa warned. "Walking away would be reckless," he replied coldly. She didn't push further. Instead, she said softly, "Tomorrow, we knock with the law behind us." Daniel reached back, resting his hand on Coda's fur. She leaned into him, steady and sure. "You hear that, girl?" he whispered. "Tomorrow, we will bring her out." Coda's amber eyes gleamed in the dashlight, her chin resting on the console. For Daniel, it was enough. Proof lived in her instincts and in the whispered confession of a child. Tomorrow, they would knock again, and this time, they wouldn't leave without her. The sky over Brookridge pressed low, clouds layered like grey stone, muting the town into silence. Daniel Ruiz gripped the wheel as he eased the cruiser into Sunset Manor's cracked lot. Behind him, Sergeant Maria Torres pulled up in her unmarked car, headlights dim. Beside Daniel, Vanessa Reyes clutched the freshly stamped court order. In the back, Coda sat rigid, amber eyes locked on the blue door at the top of the stairwell. Torres joined them, calming authority in every step. "We're not here to fight," she said. "We're here to enforce the order." They climbed together, boots echoing against rusted rails. Coda padded close to Daniel, muscles taut. At Unit 2B, Vanessa knocked, voice steady. "Mr. Briggs, CPS with a welfare check for Hannah." Silence stretched. Then the chain scraped, and Dante Briggs appeared, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, tattoos crawling his forearms. He looked older than days ago, brittle around the edges. "She's fine," he muttered. "Napping." Vanessa raised the order. "This authorizes us to see her directly." Briggs's jaw clenched. Torres's voice cut in, even and sharp. "Either open the door, or I'll bring more uniforms than you want to see." Briggs cursed under his breath, then unlatched the chain. The smell hit them, stale food, smoke, sour milk. The living room was bare, couch, TV, no toys, no warmth. Coda went still, nose lifted toward the narrow hallway. Every muscle pointed to the closed bedroom door. "Hannah?" Vanessa called softly. "It's Vanessa. I came back like I promised. Can I see you?" The door creaked. Hannah appeared, small, pale, hair tangled, dress smudged. Mr. Patches clutched to her chest. Her wide grey-blue eyes carried exhaustion far beyond her years. Daniel's throat tightened. Vanessa crouched. "Do you remember me?" A tiny nod. Arms locked tighter around the bear. "Mr. Patches looks braver today." Vanessa smiled. "He's all I have," Hannah whispered. Coda lowered her body, ears forward. Hannah's eyes fixed on her. A flicker of light crossed her face. She whispered, trembling, "She saw me." Vanessa froze. "What did you say?" "She saw me at the store. Nobody else did. Just her." Daniel crouched by Coda. "That's right. Coda saw you. She never misses." Hope shimmered faintly in Hannah's eyes. Torres stepped forward. "We're taking Hannah now, Mr. Briggs. This isn't optional." Briggs swore, pacing, but didn't resist. His shoulders sagged, anger collapsing into resignation. Vanessa offered her hand. "Come with me, sweetheart. You'll have food, a clean bed. Mr. Patches can come too." Hannah hesitated, eyes flicking to Coda. Daniel promised. "She'll be there every step." That was enough. Hannah slipped her hand into Vanessa's, knuckles pale around the bear. Coda walked beside her, close enough for her fingers to brush the shepherd's fur. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight lift. Hannah wasn't invisible anymore. The hallway seemed narrower, leaving than entering. Dante followed, muttering curses, shoulders hunched. Torres stayed close, steady as a wall. At the base of the stairs, Vanessa crouched to Hannah again. "We're going to a safe place, warm, with food. Mr. Patches, too." Hannah nodded, clutching the bear tighter. Her eyes darted to Dante. "This is wrong," Dante burst out. "I didn't hurt her. I took her when no one else would." "You think I wanted this?" "Then why no toys, no school, no records?" Torres asked evenly. He flinched. "Because I didn't know how. Because she was scared and I couldn't fix it. Because her mother left." His voice cracked. Daniel studied him. Anger, guilt, confusion, all there. But none outweighed Hannah's need. Vanessa stayed firm. "This isn't an arrest, but she cannot stay here. If you care for her, you'll accept that." Briggs sagged. Fight gone. He pressed his fists against the wall. Hannah watched him silently, unreadable. Then she bent to Coda, pressing her forehead against the dog's. She whispered something too soft for anyone but Coda. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight. When she pulled back, She gave Coda a trembling smile. Half thank you, half goodbye. Vanessa touched her shoulder. It's time. Hannah nodded. Together they stepped into the parking lot, rain beginning to fall. Vanessa guided her to the car. Before climbing in, Hannah turned once more. Her eyes sought Daniel's, then Coda's. She didn't speak, but the plea was clear. Don't forget me. Daniel gave a faint nod. Coda's ears flicked forward, her gaze locked until Hannah was inside. Briggs slumped at the stairwell, face in his hands. Torres stood nearby, clipboard ready. No charges tonight, she told him, but cooperate with the investigation. Daniel turned away. He joined Vanessa at the car, crouching by the window. Hannah pressed her forehead to the glass, Mr. Patches tight to her chest. Daniel lifted a hand. Slowly, she raised hers, palm to palm through the glass. It was enough, for now. The taillights glowed red against wet pavement as the car pulled away. Rain blurred the outlines of the world. Daniel stood in it, soaked through, Coda pressing against his leg. Finally he whispered, "We're not finished. Not until she's safe." Coda whined softly, tail brushing his side. Together they made the promise again. Hannah would not be another ghost. Back at the station, rain-slicked asphalt reflected the streetlights. Daniel parked, sat in silence, then went inside. The bullpen was quiet. Torres at her desk, a silent nod his only reassurance. In his office, he sank into his chair, pen hovering over the blank report form. Reports demanded sterile facts. Nothing tonight had been sterile. He began anyway. Subject: welfare check, Unit 2B. Involved parties: Dante Briggs, minor female; Hannah, surname unknown. He described the court order, the apartment's condition, Hannah's appearance. He noted Mr. Patches by name, anchoring her reality with that threadbare bear. Then he wrote the most important line. K9 Coda recognized distress before any adult present. He paused, staring at the sentence. It wasn't standard protocol, but it was truth. Coda had known first. In the supermarket, at the stairwell, at the blinds. And tonight, when Hannah whispered, "She saw me," it was more than comfort. It was recognition. He underlined the sentence once. The clock ticked past midnight. He forced himself to finish, recording every detail. The hesitations, the whispered no, the fragile smile pressed into Coda's fur. Stacking the report, he leaned back, exhaustion heavy but resolve heavier. Coda shifted at the door, waiting. Daniel crouched beside her, hand on her fur. "You did it, girl. You gave her a voice." Her tail thumped once. For a while he sat with her in silence, the day replaying, the knock, Hannah's face, Briggs's collapse, and that whispered vow. She saw me. He wouldn't fail this one. Not Hannah. When he finally rose, shutting off the light, the bullpen was nearly empty. Vanessa was likely still with Hannah, making sure her first night away wasn't spent alone. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. Daniel slid into the cruiser. Coda leapt in, circling once before settling. He didn't start the engine right away. He whispered the line again like a prayer. K9 Coda recognized distress before any adult present. That's the line that saves her. Coda lifted her head, eyes meeting his in the dim glow. Resolve settled between them, steady and unbreakable. Hannah was safe for now. Tomorrow would bring more battles, but tonight they had kept their promise. Daniel touched the dash. "We're not done yet." Coda's tail swept once, answering without words. Together they pulled into the misty night, carrying both ghosts and anchors with them. The shelter sat between a shuttered laundromat and a church with peeling paint, its steeple bowed as if under the weight of years. The brick building looked ordinary, but for the women inside it was the line between survival and silence. A hand-painted sign read, "Safe Haven House." Vanessa Reyes pushed through the heavy door, clipboard tucked beneath her arm, badge swinging on its lanyard. The air smelled faintly of lavender cleaner and bread baking somewhere down the hall. Children whispered to mothers. Slippers shuffled softly on tile. It was quiet, not from peace, but from exhaustion. A receptionist looked up. "You're with CPS?" "Yes," Vanessa said gently. "I'm here for Tasha Monroe. She's in the common room." Vanessa's heels clicked softly down the hall. Every step reminded her of the weight of this work, the invisible histories carved into every bed, every closed door. The common room was simple. Worn couches, mismatched chairs, a muted television. Some women clung to toddlers. Others stared into cups of coffee, like they were trying to remember warmth. By the window stood a woman, arms folded tight. Blonde hair fell loose from a ponytail. Her sweater hung thin on her frame. She looked fragile, as if holding herself together by sheer force. "Tasha?" Vanessa's voice was careful. The woman turned, pale blue eyes rimmed red, but sharp with awareness. "Yes?" "My name is Vanessa Reyes, Child Protective Services. I've been looking after your daughter, Hannah." At the name, Tasha's hands clenched. Hope, fear, guilt, all collided in her face. Is she all right?" "She's safe," Vanessa said softly. "Under protective custody. We're working to reunite you." Tasha collapsed into a chair, covering her face, shoulders shaking. "I thought I'd lost her." Vanessa set the clipboard aside. "Can you tell me why she was left with Dante Briggs?" The name cracked something in Tasha. Her words came haltingly. "Marcus, Hannah's father. He changed after she was born. Loud, cruel. First words, then fists. He threatened to take Hannah if I left. One night, drunk and mean, I ran, but I couldn't take her. He'd have found us both." Vanessa leaned closer. "So you left her with Dante?" Tasha nodded, shame twisting her face. "He lived across the hall. Quiet man. Worked nights. I thought he could keep her hidden long enough. Just a few days, I told myself. But Marcus was everywhere. Outside shelters, diners, even my sister's house. I couldn't breathe. Days turned into weeks. Every night I swore tomorrow I'd go back. But tomorrow never came." Vanessa let silence sit, then said gently, "Hannah never stopped holding on to you. She carries her teddy bear, Mr. Patches, like he's all she has left. She told me his name like it was a secret she couldn't give up." At that, Tasha broke completely. "I gave her that bear on her 3rd birthday. I hoped she'd know I hadn't abandoned her." Vanessa placed her hand over Tasha's trembling ones. "She knew. She's stronger than you think. But she needs you now, not someday. Now." Tasha gripped her hand fiercely. "Then help me. I'll do anything. Sit in every courtroom, fill out every paper. Just bring her back." Vanessa nodded. "We'll start reunification. It won't be instant, but you'll see her soon. Supervised at first." "This is the first step back." Tasha pressed her hand to her mouth, whispering through tears, "Thank you." In her eyes, Vanessa saw not abandonment, but sacrifice. The common room hushed when Officer Daniel Ruiz entered with Coda at his side. The German shepherd's amber eyes scanned quietly, her vest snug against her frame. She didn't need words to know why they were here. Vanessa crouched beside Tasha. This is Officer Ruiz. And this is Coda. Tasha froze, breath hitching. Then, slowly, she reached out. Her fingers brushed Coda's fur, tentative at first, then clinging like she was holding the only solid thing left. Tears slid down her face. "Hannah said..." Her voice cracked. She bent close, forehead against Coda's head. "She said the dog saw her, that no one else did." Daniel felt his chest tighten. He'd heard children whisper confessions before, but hearing them echoed in a mother's grief cut deeper. Coda stood perfectly still, letting the tears fall on her fur. Her calm steadied the room. "I left her with Dante," Tasha whispered suddenly. "Marcus." Her body shuddered at the name. "He said he'd kill me if I left with her. I thought hiding her with a neighbor was safer, just for a few days." Her words broke into sobs. Vanessa's voice was steady. "You didn't abandon her. You gave her the only chance you believed she had." Tasha shook her head, grief pouring out. But weeks turned into months. My baby thought I'd left her forever. Coda pressed her weight against Tasha's knees, grounding her. Tasha cupped the dog's face, eyes searching. She wasn't wrong, was she? The dog really did see her. Daniel stepped closer. His voice was raw but certain. She was right. Coda stopped me in that grocery aisle. She never let go of Hannah, not once. Tasha broke again, clinging to the shepherd. The room itself seemed to hush, giving space to her grief and gratitude. Finally, Vanessa said, "You're safe here. Hannah is safe too." This is the start. It won't be easy. Paperwork, hearings, supervised visits, but it's possible. "I'll do anything," Tasha whispered. Daniel looked at her, remembering Hannah's whispering she saw me, and Tasha's tearful thank you. Every thread of the case converged here, mother, child, and dog. "You'll see her soon," he said quietly, "and she'll know the truth, that you never stopped fighting." Tasha pressed her lips to Coda's head. "Thank you for seeing my little girl when I couldn't." For the first time in days, Daniel felt peace flicker through the weight. The precinct smelled of burnt coffee and paper. Sergeant Maria Torres flipped through a thick folder, glasses low on her nose. Daniel stood across from her, arms folded, Coda at his feet. Vanessa perched on a chair, clipboard hugged to her chest. "Statement checks out," Torres said evenly. "Classic domestic violence flight. Survival never looks clean on paper, but it makes sense. Marcus has priors." "She never filed, which is common." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Does that make her unfit?" "No, it makes her human." Torres tapped the file. Vanessa leaned forward. "She never stopped protecting Hannah. Leaving her was sacrifice, not neglect." Torres studied her, then nodded. "Courts will see it too if we frame it right. Next step? Supervised reunification. Controlled visit at the shelter. We'll watch Hannah's reaction, Tasha's stability. If it goes well, we move toward custody hearings. Until then, Hannah stays in protective care." Vanessa's shoulders eased. "I'll handle the paperwork today." "You'll need more than paperwork," Torres said. "The judge will want testimony, your observations, Ruiz's reports, even Coda's involvement." Daniel frowned. "Coda's involvement?" Torres smiled faintly. "You wrote it yourself. K9 Coda recognized distress before any adult present. The court won't ignore that." Daniel looked down at the shepherd. Pride flickered in his chest. "The visit's tomorrow," Torres said. 1 hour. Controlled environment. Then we evaluate." Vanessa nodded. "Children remember love, even under fear. I believe Hannah will know her." Daniel thought of Hannah's hand on the cruiser window, her whispered trust, the crayon drawing in the trash. All of it led here. "She deserves the chance." he said quietly. Torres pushed the folder across the desk. Then it said, "Tomorrow morning, mother and daughter will see each other again." The words filled the room with fragile hope. Daniel crouched beside Coda, scratching behind her ears. "You hear that, girl? Tomorrow, we bring her back." Coda's tail brushed the tile, her silent promise steady. Vanessa gathered her papers like something sacred. Torres picked up the phone to set it all in motion. Out in the hallway, Daniel paused at the glass doors. Sunlight poured across the pavement, pale and clean after rain. He whispered more to himself than anyone, "No more ghosts." Coda nudged his leg as if to agree. Together they stepped into the light, carrying paperwork, promises, and a fragile thread of hope. The room was so quiet, Daniel could hear the tick of the wall clock, steady as a nervous heartbeat. The shelter staff had cleared the common room for privacy. Sunlight slipped through half-open curtains, chamomile tea scented the air, and a heater hummed faintly. Daniel stood near the door, one hand on Coda's harness. The shepherd was still, ears pricked, gaze fixed on the far end of the room where Vanessa coaxed Hannah forward. The little girl clutched Mr. Patches, her teddy bear's ear dangling loose. Her shoulders were stiff, steps hesitant, as if she stood at the edge of a cliff. Across the room, trembling but waiting, was Tasha. She sat forward on the couch, hands twisting in her lap, face pale and eyes swollen from nights of tears. Her voice cracked the air, tender and broken. "Baby girl, Hannah." Hannah froze, fingers tightening on the bear. Then, almost imperceptibly, she let go. Mr. Patches slipped to the carpet with a soft thud that sounded like a bell toll. Her face crumpled. "Mommy!" She stumbled forward, collapsing into her mother's arms. Tasha folded around her, fortress-like, sobbing, as she pressed kisses into her daughter's hair. "I'm here, baby. I'm so sorry." Hannah clung fiercely, arms digging into her sweater, her cries raw and unguarded. Vanessa blinked hard, clipboard forgotten at her side. Daniel looked away, his throat tight, while beside him, Coda remained motionless, a sentinel watching the reunion she had made possible. Minutes passed. Finally, Tasha cupped Hannah's face. "Did you think I left you because I didn't love you?" Hannah sniffled. "I thought maybe you couldn't find me." "I never stopped looking," Tasha whispered, kissing her forehead. "You were my heartbeat every day." The girl's eyes shifted toward Coda. "She saw me, Mommy, when nobody else did." Tasha turned to the shepherd, chest heaving. "Thank you." Coda stepped closer, lowering her head against Hannah's leg. Hannah's fingers tangled in her fur as she stayed pressed into her mother's arms. For a moment it was a triangle of connection, mother, daughter, dog, anchoring one another. "You've got her back now," Daniel murmured. "That's what matters." Tasha held her daughter tighter. "You're safe now. You're safe." For the first time, Hannah seemed to believe it. Weeks passed, but the weight of that day lingered. Dante Morales, once evasive and defensive, had begun to change. His apartment no longer smelled of neglect. Colorful prints now hung on the walls. He enrolled in night classes for early childhood education, trying to understand the mistakes he had made. "The only good I did was keeping her alive," he confessed to an instructor. The reply was simple. Acknowledging it is the first step. Build from there. Tasha, too, was finding her footing. She worked at a community center while attending counseling and a survivors support group. Sharing her story was painful, but it lightened the weight of silence. Most importantly, she learned to listen. To Hannah. For Hannah, the world was stitching itself back together. She returned to school cautiously, clutching Mr. Patches on the walk. Teachers gave her patience. She made a quiet friend named Sophie, who loved drawing. At home, mornings softened. Tasha cooked while Hannah played with Coda in the living room. The dog became her confidant. Hannah whispered secrets, apologies, and fears into her fur. Coda listened with steady patience. Daniel and Vanessa checked in. Daniel often dropped by with snacks or school supplies, his presence steady but unobtrusive. Vanessa left books and quiet encouragement. The shepherd's instincts had once uncovered Hannah's silent plea. Now they safeguarded her recovery. Dante contributed in quiet ways, fixing a chair, checking locks, leaving small crayon sketches of children playing safely. He never asked forgiveness directly, letting his actions speak. Even neighbors, once suspicious, began to nod greetings when they saw Hannah and Coda outside. Through it all, Coda remained a constant. She was Daniel's anchor, Hannah's guardian, Tasha's reminder that compassion could survive fear. One evening, Hannah sat cross-legged on the carpet, drawing. She sketched her old apartment building, but this time a smiling girl stood outside with a dog. She looked up at Tasha. "She's always with me, Mommy. Coda." Tasha brushed hair from her daughter's face. "Yes, baby. She always will be." Daniel, watching from the doorway with Coda at his side, understood. The ripples of that one night, the supermarket aisle, the silent signal, had spread further than any report could capture. The academy classroom buzzed with nervous recruits. Boots scuffed the floor, pens clicked, murmurs filled the air. Posters lined the walls, but one corner remained bare, waiting. Daniel Ruiz stood at the front, uniform crisp, posture relaxed. Beside him, Coda lay stretched out, amber eyes scanning the room. Her presence alone commanded attention. "Settle down," Daniel said, voice calm but firm. The room hushed. He gestured to Coda. "Policing isn't just about rules. It's about recognition, seeing what others overlook. That's what saves lives." He wrote 2 words on the board: instinct and trust. Coda here is proof. You'll learn how to read behavior, lies, shifts, flinches. But sometimes instinct sees what training misses. He opened a folder, pulling out a worn crayon drawing, shaky lines in bright colors. A girl, a dog, a teddy bear, and a tall man in blue. At the bottom, "Thank you for seeing me." Daniel pinned it to the bare wall. Her name is Hannah, 5 years old. She made a signal most adults would miss. I did. Coda didn't. She froze in a supermarket aisle until I saw what she saw. That little girl was asking for help, silently, desperately. Without this dog, I might have walked past her. The room was silent now, every recruit leaning in. We uncovered an empty apartment, a frightened child, a drawing of fear. And every step, Coda showed me where to look when the law said I didn't have enough. He let the weight settle. The law gives boundaries. Humanity gives responsibility. Don't use one to excuse abandoning the other. Sometimes the loudest cry for help is silence. Coda rose and padded forward, standing beside him. Her tail swept the floor once, steady. Daniel rested a hand on her head. This dog saved a life, not with force, but with focus, with refusal to ignore what didn't add up. That's the kind of officer I want you to be. He nodded toward the drawing. Every time you enter this room, you'll see it. Not just art, but a reminder. Someone's survival might depend on you noticing the small things. Silence filled the room, heavy with meaning. Daniel didn't need applause, only for them to remember. Coda lay back down, eyes fixed on the drawing. The lesson was complete. The spring sun softened Brookridge, turning cracked sidewalks almost warm. At Brookside Elementary, the dismissal bell released a tide of children, backpacks bouncing, sneakers squeaking, laughter cutting the air. Daniel Ruiz leaned against his cruiser, coffee cooling beside him. Coda sat alert at his side, scanning the chaos with quiet focus. Then she froze. Her body stiffened, tail rigid, amber eyes locked on the far corner of the fence. Daniel followed her gaze. A girl no older than 6 stood half-hidden by the chain link. She clutched a pink backpack tight to her chest, fingers white on the straps. She didn't laugh. She didn't wave. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she raised her hand, palm out, thumb tucked, fingers curling down. Daniel's stomach dropped. The supermarket aisle, Hannah's trembling hand, the teddy bear. The same signal. Not again. He moved calmly, crouching a few feet away. "Hey there. I'm Officer Ruiz. What's your name?" "Aria," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name. Are you waiting for someone?" "My mom. She was supposed to come." Her lips trembled. Daniel glanced at the teachers. One was already hurrying over, concern etched on her face. Coda stepped closer, brushing her head against Aria's knee. The girl flinched, then touched the shepherd's fur with hesitant fingers. "She's nice." Daniel forced a smile. "Her name's Coda. She's a really good listener." Aria's eyes glistened. "I told her my mom gets really mad sometimes." The words pierced him. Another child, another silent plea. The teacher whispered, "She checked in this morning. No one's come for her." Over an hour. Daniel straightened, notebook in hand. "Let's get her inside. We'll make some calls." Aria clung to Coda's fur as they guided her toward the doors. The shepherd moved steady at her side, like she'd been waiting for her all along. The lavender-painted room was meant to be comforting, though the mismatched lamps and donated furniture made it feel temporary. Aria sat cross-legged on the carpet, backpack clutched like a shield. A teddy bear keychain dangled by a thread. Amanda Chen knelt across from her, clipboard resting on her lap. Her voice was calm, unhurried. "Hi, Aria. I help kids when things get confusing. I'm here to listen." The girl pulled her chin into her knees, hair falling across her face. "That's okay," Amanda said softly. "You don't have to talk yet. Sometimes it's easier just to sit." Coda eased down until her paws brushed Aria's backpack. The girl peeked sideways, then cautiously reached out, fingers brushing fur. The shepherd blinked slowly, tail thumping once. "She's nice," Aria whispered, barely audible. "She thinks you are too," Amanda said. Daniel exhaled, tension loosening slightly. He'd seen this before. Fear unspooling only when Coda was near. Amanda waited, then asked gently, "Aria, you didn't get picked up yesterday. Has that happened before?" A small nod. "That must feel scary." Aria's hand tightened in Coda's fur. "She forgets sometimes." "Who forgets, sweetheart?" "My mommy." Daniel's throat tightened. Loyalty and fear intertwined in that single word. Amanda's tone stayed steady. "Does your mommy ever get upset with you?" The girl's lip quivered. She pressed her face into Coda's head. Finally, in a cracked whisper, "Mommy gets mad." Silence followed. Amanda didn't rush to fill it. Coda gave a low sound, neither whine nor growl, but the same warning Daniel had once heard in a supermarket aisle. Amanda glanced at him. He nodded, This was more than neglect. "You were very brave to tell us," Amanda said gently. Arya whispered into Coda's fur. "I tell her things. She doesn't tell anyone." Daniel crouched. His voice was steady. "That's true. Coda keeps every secret. But her job is also to keep people safe. And mine is to listen to her." The girl lifted her eyes, uncertain, but holding fragile hope. "Will you listen too?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Always." Coda pressed closer, sealing the promise. Amanda set aside her clipboard, eyes damp. She didn't need to say it. The case was already written itself. Another signal. Another child was saved because a dog had seen first. Night draped Brookridge in silence. Daniel sat hunched over his kitchen table, lamp casting a circle of gold across scattered notes. Timelines, hand gestures, fragments of cases. One word repeated in messy scrawl. Signal. Coda lay near the door, ears twitching at each sigh. She knew this wasn't routine paperwork. This was something heavier. Daniel rubbed his face, then began typing. It's never loud. It's never obvious. Sometimes the cry for help isn't a sound at all. It's a glance, a hesitation, a hand gesture most adults don't know how to read. But dogs know. And when they freeze, when they won't look away, they are telling us something the world has already missed. He titled it, Echoes They Leave Behind. Hannah in the cereal aisle. Her small hand folding in on itself. Arya at the fence, clutching her backpack like armor. Two girls, two signals. Not coincidences, echoes, repeating until someone stopped to listen. These signals are lifelines, he wrote. The last threads children cling to when everything else has failed. If we dismiss them, we leave those children to vanish into silence. He thought of Hannah's crayon drawing pinned on the academy wall. Thank you for seeing me. Proof that sometimes heroism meant simply noticing. His outline formed. Introduction. The unspoken signals of distress. Case 1. Hannah Monroe, age 5. Case 2. Arya Milan, age 6. Role of K9. Instinct. Recognition of emotional cues. Why officers miss what dogs see. Conclusion. Listening beyond words. Coda stirred, padding over to rest her muzzle on his thigh. Daniel scratched behind her ears. You saw it first, he whispered. You never let me look away. Her soft huff was the only answer he needed. When he finally saved the draft, exhaustion tugging at him, the words glowed on the screen like a vow. Echoes they leave behind. The house was quiet again, but not the silence of neglect. It was the silence of something beginning. Echoes finally being heard. Coda settled at his feet, amber eyes reflecting the lamplight, steady as a guardian carved from the dark. The dogwoods along Maple Street scattered pale petals like forgotten snow. Daniel parked in front of the small duplex. Peeling paint, squeaky screen door, weeds in the yard. But warmth lived here now. Curtains fluttered in the windows. A bicycle leaned against the porch. Coda bounded from the cruiser, trotting to the walk as if she knew the rhythm of this house. Tasha opened the door, sunlight falling across her face. She looked stronger, her shoulders unbowed, her eyes clear. She's in the living room, she said. She's been waiting all morning. Inside, Hannah sat cross-legged at a small keyboard, tongue caught in concentration as she plunked out a children's tune. A paper beside her showed rows of shaky A's and B's. When she noticed them, she leapt up, crayon drawing clutched in her hand. Look! The paper showed 3 figures beneath a yellow sun, a tall woman, a little girl holding a teddy bear, and a German shepherd with oversized ears. Scrawled above, me, Mommy, and Coda. Daniel knelt, throat tight. "This is beautiful, Hannah." She whispered like sharing a secret. "I'm not afraid anymore." Coda pressed her head into Hannah's chest, and the girl giggled, wrapping her arms around the dog's neck. From the doorway, Tasha's voice was steady with pride. She practices every night, and she loves music class. Hannah tugged Daniel toward another drawing on the table, this time 4 figures: herself, her mother, Coda, and a tall man in blue with a badge. At the bottom, uneven crayon letters read, "Thank you for seeing me." Daniel blinked against the sting in his eyes. "I'll keep this one forever," he said. The afternoon drifted in soft and ordinary ways. Tasha poured lemonade, Hannah played another tune, and Coda sprawled content across the rug. For Daniel, it was proof the smallest decision to notice could ripple outward, reshaping lives. The day of Coda's retirement, the squad room smelled of coffee and donuts. No speeches, no banners, just officers gathered with unpolished sincerity. A simple plaque lay on the table. To Coda, who listened when no one else did. Daniel accepted it with a faint smile. Coda sat at his side, tail brushing once against the floor. "She's still got work to do," Daniel said. "Just a different kind." Laughter rippled gently through the room. Everyone knew it was true. Weeks later, Daniel walked hospital corridors with Coda trotting at his side. The halls smelled of antiseptic and crayons, an odd mix of sterility and resilience. The trauma response program had been his idea, half-formed at first, until the administration embraced it. In a sky-blue room, a boy sat propped against pillows, his arm in a sling, gaze distant. He hadn't spoken all day. Nurses tried, Daniel tried, but nothing pierced his silence. Then Coda padded forward, placing her head gently on his blanket. The boy's hand twitched, then slowly brushed her fur. "She's nice," he whispered. The first words anyone had heard from him since the accident. Daniel met the nurse's damp eyes. "She thinks you're nice too," he said quietly. Coda thumped her tail once, sealing the moment. Not every breakthrough made headlines. But Daniel kept a notebook. March 14th. Boy smiled when Coda leaned in. March 27th. Girl whispered for the first time in weeks. April 5th. Arya asked to braid Coda's fur. Each line was small, but together they formed a ledger of hope. One evening, after a long day at the shelter, Daniel sat on his porch, coffee cooling in his hand. The spring air carried lilacs and the faint smoke of someone's barbecue down the block. Coda lay at his feet, her muzzle now dusted with gray, but her eyes still sharp, steady. He thought of Hannah's open window, Arya's whispered secrets, the boy in the hospital bed. Quiet victories, none of them dramatic, but each a thread stitched back into a life. Some stories, he realized, don't end with sirens. They end humbly, with small ripples. A child safe, a mother healing, a dog listening when no one else did. Daniel brushed his fingers through Coda's fur. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. "Sometimes," he whispered, "just stopping is enough." Coda blinked slowly, leaning her head into his hand. The porch light flickered on, casting them in a circle of soft yellow. The world beyond was uncertain, but here, for now, it felt whole. Daniel leaned back, watching her settle again, her body curved protectively near his boots. No roar of sirens, no flash of badges, just the steady breath of a companion who had carried more lives in her silence than most would in words. And he knew with certainty anchoring him that heroes don't always roar. Sometimes, the greatest ones simply listen. There's something timeless about the bond between people and dogs, especially German shepherds. Their loyalty isn't loud, but steady, felt in the way they sit beside us when we're tired, or the way they notice what no one else does. Stories like Coda's remind us that love, healing, and hope often arrive on four legs, with a quiet gaze that says, "I'm here." If you've ever wondered how to connect more deeply with your own dog, whether through training, play, or simply learning to listen, you might enjoy this resource I came across. It's gentle, practical, and full of ways to strengthen the trust that makes our companions so special. I'll leave the link here if you'd like to explore it. At the end of the day, these animals give us more than we could ever repay. Maybe the best we can do is slow down, notice them, and love them back with the same loyalty they've shown us all along. If that speaks to you, I think you'll find the resource worth your time.